storm that produced the rotation in Mishawaka and in Granger, but that storm falling apart. Let's focus on what's going on in Cass County. I want to show you the velocity, which is that rotation data that we look at to see areas of potential rotation in a thunderstorm. Right now, there's two areas that I'm concerned with this storm right now. One of them is south of Cassopolis. You can see where that green and that red are coming together. It's very broad rotation, but that is where one area of concern is. The other area is north of Cassopolis, pretty much between there and LaGrange. That area, it's not as tight. However, it is still possible to see some very broad rotation with this storm. Now, this is the same thunderstorm that moved through Mishawaka, that moved through Granger, that brought the rotation there and prompted the tornado warning there. At the moment, what I like about this storm is we're not seeing that tight rotation like we did earlier. However, it's still very broad, and that means 1 minute it could be very broad rotation. The next minute it could cycle and strengthen very quickly. When we look at how fast those winds are, they're not very fast. They're less than 30 miles per hour when we're looking at radar estimated wind speeds. Now, the reason we're concerned is because those winds are rotating potentially when we look at that radar. And that is where we could see a funnel cloud develop, or if that funnel cloud makes it to the ground, potentially a tornado. Let's put the radar back on there. This is showing those greens and those reds, those yellows, the colors we're familiar with seeing when we look at radar. We also don't see this looking very textbook-like. Normally when we look at a storm like this, in order for it to see rotation, we look toward the bottom part of the storm to find some rain wrapping around in a similar, it looks like a hook echo, kind of just wrapping around the bottom side of the storm. This storm is not doing that. However, the rotation is embedded within the thunderstorm itself. So it's one of those situations where if you are in Cass County, you need to plan as if there could be a tornado heading your way because this rotation is very difficult to see. One thing of note, this storm, it's also producing a lot of heavy rainfall, and that's going to obscure being able to see anything dangerous in the sky. So let's talk about other locations in the threat of this storm. I'm going to zoom in on this storm, put a storm track on it so we can get an idea of how fast it is moving and who could be looking at that storm in the next few minutes. I'm just adjusting the parameters so we can get an accurate look on the speed for you and the locations. It looks like Spring Beach could see that storm if it holds together at its current speed and strength just before 7 o'clock. So look at the clock now, it's 6:51, so that's less than 10 minutes away. Penn Township, for example, could be looking at that at 7:06. Marcellus, again, same thing. If it holds together at this speed and this strength, likely looking at this storm by 7:38 p.m. Let me clean things up for you so we can get a fresh look at this storm and what's going on. This is a part of a larger storm. It's the same storm that brought the rotation to northern St. Joe County, areas like South Bend and Mishawaka. Now it's in Cass County, impacting areas like Cassopolis. For example, if you are familiar more with highways, where M60 intersects with M62, that's just in Cassopolis, that's where we're looking at the center part of this storm right now. Eagle Point, probably looking at some very gusty conditions right now. Spring Beach, looking at seeing the storm just knocking on your door. Vandalia, you are included in this warning. At the moment, though, you are dry and you're not seeing that heavy rain. You're not seeing those gusty winds, but it is within a few miles. In fact, from the center where that storm is to Vandalia is 5 miles, and the storm is moving at 15 miles per hour. So we're likely going to see that most intense part of the storm within 15 minutes. But again, the leading edge likely going to be knocking on your doorstep here very quickly. All right, other roads to watch for. O'Keefe Road, for example, Brownsville Road, just north of Calvin and Brownsville, for example. We're seeing that area included in the warning. Let me widen this view for you and take a look and see if we have any updates from the National Weather Service. I'm going to be bouncing between different computers as we get more information. I am not seeing any new information regarding this tornado warning in Cass County. However, that severe thunderstorm warning that we've been mentioning, I'll briefly look at it once again and show you that storm. Right now it has a warning on it until 7 o'clock in the evening, but as you can see, it's not very organized. It is falling apart, and so the National Weather Service will be expiring this warning at 7 o'clock when it comes to the end. That tornado warning that we've been talking about, that goes for another 15 minutes beyond that until 7:15. And we are going to stay on the air for as long as that threat is necessary. So in this case, as long as there's a tornado warning because of the threat for rotation. Now, when we look at rotation in a storm, we are looking for a specific parameter, or a specific thing rather, on a specific parameter. This thing right here, this parameter, we call velocity, and it's showing the wind speeds in relation to where the Doppler radar is. One color is the wind moving toward the radar, the other is the direction moving away. And it's right here where you have the green and the red coming together that there is some very broad rotation associated with this storm, and even some gusty winds too. That's why the threat is there for rotation. Now, when we have rotation that's very tight and just very organized, that's where we're likely seeing a funnel cloud or a tornado on the ground. In a situation like this, because it's so broad, we really cannot tell if there's something happening on the ground at the moment. But for example, if you're in Cassopolis, this is not the time to be outside looking up in the sky to see if there's something going on. This is the time to be in your safe place, whether it's the basement, whether it's a bathroom or an interior room with no windows, putting yourself between, or putting as many walls between you and the outside of the house as possible. When we look at that rotation a lot closer and seeing where the strongest winds are, Osborne Street, if you're familiar with that area, that's where we're seeing the strongest winds at the moment. So just west of Brownsville, that's where we're talking on Osborne Street. Now, overall, again, we've talked about how this rotation is very broad. It's not very organized, but the threat is there at seeing some rotation. Something that we've been doing today, we've been looking at the radar, showing how these storms have evolved. I'm going to do that exact same thing for you right here. So let's start at 625. Things are not very organized with that storm, but once we hit after 6:30, I'm going to show you, I'm going to step on the screen, show you where we're looking at. It's this mark right here outside of Cassopolis. That broad area of rotation is what prompted this tornado warning, and that's what prompted the National Weather Service to kind of take matters into their own hands, put a warning on this storm. As we go further into that frame and that loop, you can see that rotation has fallen apart, but it is still there and it is still very broad. We need to treat this storm as if there is rotation with it and there is the threat at seeing rotating thunderstorms, even some funnel clouds, maybe even an isolated tornado. This is kind of the environment that we have been dealing with all day today. It's the same complex of storms that brought tornado warnings and confirmed tornadoes in LaGrange County. Not necessarily the exact same thunderstorm. This thunderstorm is different than the one that hit LaGrange County, but this is the same one that brought those rotating thunderstorms through Mishawaka, through South Bend, and into Granger before it started to fall apart. It continues to move to the north, but we've talked about how it's very slow. It's only moving at around 15 miles per hour or so. So where we're seeing the rain, it's falling pretty heavy at times because it's not moving very fast. You're going to have some scary looking clouds in the sky too, especially if you're in the area of this warning. So Penn Township, we've talked about. Vandalia, skies are probably looking a little intense at the moment right now. Brownsville, same thing. Cassopolis, you are probably seeing the most intense rain and gusty winds at the moment, maybe even just outside of Cassopolis as this storm moves through your area. I'm going to take a look at the radar once again, because different things, different parameters, we can see different things on. This radar, or this velocity we've been looking at, is good for showing that rotation. We can't get that same sense of rotation when we look at Doppler radar, but one thing we can look at is where we're seeing that rotation occurring, just not necessarily measuring the strength of the rotation. Where it would be occurring, this area of potential rotation, would be just west of Penn and Vandalia. It's not very organized. It's not very tight. But where you see kind of the storm starting to wrap around on the south side a little bit, that's where the area of rotation potentially would be. So, for example, here's M60 going through Cassopolis and into Vandalia. Here's Penn just north of there. That's where we're likely, and maybe you're traveling along M60, that could be where there's some very broad rotation in the sky, where things are getting a little bit windy, the rain is getting really heavy. In fact, that heavy rain just now moving out of Cassopolis, likely going to impact Penn and Vandalia here very quick. But this tornado warning, again, not for an active tornado on the ground, but the conditions exist that a tornado could be likely with rotation exhibited in this storm. This storm has had a history of producing rotation. This is not the first chance or the first time we've seen rotation with this storm, but it's just been kind of something we have been looking at all through the afternoon. Now, one thing of note, if you are in, for example, Cassopolis, the storm's moving out of your neighborhood and you're seeing maybe the damage left over from the storm, if it is safe to do so and you want to take a picture or video of what you see and send it to us, send it to our newsroom email. It'd be news@WSBT.com. They can pass along the information to me and I can communicate it that way. At the moment, I cannot look at email, look at my social media pages to see what's going on. So that is going to be the best way to do that. At the moment, we do not have a tornado on the ground. In fact, we are getting very little information from the National Weather Service right now, but we need to remember